24 large dorsal fins broke the water as 14 people in military-spec combat armor stood on the bank of the lake, tossing bodies in, the strong current immediately carrying them toward deeper waters where the sharks waited for their next meal. Sabas Gossard watched the gruesome display from atop a stone bridge 100 feet above the lake itself. He continued to watch as the bodies were thrown into the lake. It was horrific and terrifying, but Sabas couldn't turn away. He watched as the town of Onab's dead became food for those monstrous creatures beneath the darkness of the water. A forest nestled beside the lake, and the barren tundra to the south stretched for hundreds of kilometers. Onab had been built to allow the population to mine the nearby mountains, and they'd done a good job. Being so far from anything close to civilization also meant they were in an excellent place to be manipulated into doing exactly what Sabas's partners needed them to do. Onab had been home to a little over 4,000 people, one of the few towns on the planet of Ocrian, the majority of which were all there to mine the vast mountain reaches. Men, women, and children living in a thriving mining community in a quiet part of Union space. All dead. When Sabas had been informed of the deaths, he'd assumed something a lot more dramatic than the empty streets he'd walked through upon arriving. He'd wondered why there were no corpses, no blood, no scent of death, although there was a sharp, pungent odor he couldn't quite place. Doors to homes were open, food on tables that had been left to rot explained the caustic scent. Visi screens showed nothing but static as the satellite system for the city of Onab had been destroyed. No one had been able to get a message out or about what had happened, and the vast distances and general distrust between towns meant people minded their own business. A saving grace. It had been eerily quiet. Sabas had the sudden need to be off the bridge, but this was where he was told to meet her, and he was not about to become the first living meal for those monsters in the lake. He was still a little unsure exactly what had happened to the town. He'd heard that everyone had died and had been told to come to the planet quickly, but no one had explained what he would be walking into. They'd said it was safe, but that was the extent of their imparted knowledge. While Sabas had arrived on planet with his 3 bodyguards, he'd left them back at the small spaceport. 2 ships had been moored there, both squire corvettes, sleek red and chrome ships with seats for 4, and both with extensive plasma burns around the engines and wings. Neither would fly again. He was a little sad about that. The ships had done nothing wrong, and both looked like something he would have enjoyed flying. He cared little about the human or alien population of Onab, but destroying expensive property for no reason just seemed wasteful. If there was one lesson he'd actually learned from his father, other than shoot first, it was to not be wasteful. It was a 15-minute walk from the port to the meeting point. Onab was a warm city on a mostly warm planet, and the walk was almost entirely up a gentle incline. Sabas was not a small man. Prison had given him time to do little else but train his muscles, his mind, and devise ways he was going to kill everyone who had put him in his cell. He stood 6.5 feet tall and weighed nearly 300 pounds of almost solid, albeit surgically enhanced, muscle. Sabas removed his navy jacket and rolled up the sleeves on his white shirt, the latter of which was probably a size too small. Colourful tattoos covered both arms, depicting mythological creatures of a time when stories told of heroes testing themselves against such things. He'd always wanted to prove himself against the best. He'd done just that for several years before his arrest, although the vast majority of people he'd encountered hadn't lived up to expectations.